I never thought I'd be the kind of person to suspect my own husband of anything shady. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, doesn't it? It all started on what seemed like just another ordinary night in our cozy little house in suburban Boston. It was around 3 a.m. when I stirred from sleep, the kind of hour where the world feels like it's holding its breath. You know that feeling, right? When even the crickets seem to have called it a night, and the only sound is the gentle hum of the AC. I'm usually a pretty sound sleeper, so waking up like that was unusual. At first, I couldn't put my finger on what had roused me. Then I heard it, the soft shuffle of feet on our hardwood floors, barely audible but unmistakable in the stillness of the night. My first thought was that Jason, my husband of 5 years, was just making a trip to the bathroom. But as I rolled over, squinting in the darkness, I realized his side of the bed was empty and cold. He'd been up for a while. Now, I'm not typically the suspicious type. Jason and I have always had a pretty solid relationship. We met in college, bonded over our shared love of terrible sci-fi movies and Thai food, and tied the knot a few years after graduation. He works in tech, I'm a teacher, and we've been saving up for a down payment on a house. Normal stuff, you know? But something about the way the blue light of his phone screen flickered in the hallway set off a little alarm in my head. I propped myself up on my elbows, trying to get a better look without making it obvious I was awake. Through the crack in the door, I could see Jason hunched over his phone, his face bathed in that eerie glow. And let me tell you, he looked nervous as hell. His eyes kept darting around, like he was afraid someone might catch him. I've never seen him look so guilty. It was such a stark contrast to the laid-back guy I thought I knew, the one who'd laugh at my terrible jokes and surprise me with flowers just because. This Jason, the one in the hallway at 3 a.m., was a stranger to me. I debated whether to call out to him. Part of me wanted to know what was going on, to confront him right then and there. But another part, the part that was still clinging to the idea of our perfect life, told me to wait, to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just answering a work email or checking on his fantasy football team. Yeah, right. Just as I was about to say something, anything, to break the tension, a floorboard creaked under Jason's foot. I swear, the way he jumped, you'd think he'd seen a ghost. His head snapped up, eyes wide with panic, and for a split second, our gazes met. I quickly shut my eyes, pretending to be asleep, but my heart was racing a mile a minute. I heard him take a deep breath, then the soft padding of his feet as he made his way back to bed. The mattress dipped as he slid in beside me, and I could feel the tension radiating off him. He was holding himself so still, probably trying not to wake me. Little did he know, sleep was the last thing on my mind. As I lay there, my thoughts were a jumbled mess. What could Jason be hiding? Was he talking to someone he shouldn't be? Planning something behind my back? I tried to recall if there had been any other signs, any changes in his behavior lately. But nothing stood out. He'd been the same old Jason, or so I thought. The rest of the night was a blur of fitful sleep and anxious thoughts. By the time the alarm went off at 7, I felt like I'd run a marathon. Jason was already up and in the shower, acting like nothing had happened. I dragged myself out of bed, feeling like I was moving through molasses. As I made my way to the kitchen to start the coffee, I noticed my phone on the counter. I always left it there to charge overnight, a habit Jason used to tease me about. What if there's an emergency, he'd say. You'd sleep right through it. Now, as I picked it up, something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. The weight was the same, the case unchanged. But as I swiped through my apps, I noticed a subtle lag, a fraction of a second delay that hadn't been there before. And there, in the corner of the screen, was a tiny icon I didn't recognize. It was so small, so inconspicuous, that I almost missed it. My first thought was that it must be from a system update. You know how phones are always updating themselves these days. But a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind, a connection to Jason's midnight phone session that I couldn't shake. I pushed the thought aside as Jason came into the kitchen, hair still damp from the shower. He gave me a quick peck on the cheek, poured himself some coffee, and started chatting about his plans for the day like nothing was amiss. I played along, sipping my own coffee and nodding at the right moments, all while my mind was racing. The day dragged on, each hour feeling like an eternity. I couldn't focus on my lessons at school, my thoughts constantly drifting back to that strange icon and Jason's guilty expression. By the time the final bell rang, I was a bundle of nerves. On my way home, I decided to stop by the bank and check our account. We'd been saving for that down payment, after all, and I figured it might give me some peace of mind. Oh, how wrong I was. As I stood at the ATM, staring at the balance on the screen, I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. Our usual balance, the product of years of careful saving and budgeting, had plummeted by $20,000. $20,000, gone just like that. I must have stood there for a solid 5 minutes, just staring at those numbers, willing them to change. People behind me in line started to grumble, but I couldn't move. It was like my feet were glued to the spot. Finally, I managed to stumble back to my car, my mind reeling. There had to be some mistake, right? Maybe the bank had made an error. Or maybe it was connected to whatever Jason had been doing last night. The drive home was a blur. I don't even remember how I made it back without crashing. All I could think about was that missing money and the look on Jason's face when I confronted him about it. As soon as I walked through the door, I called out to him. He was in the living room, feet up on the coffee table, watching some game on TV. The picture of relaxation, as if our life savings hadn't just vanished into thin air. "Jason," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "did you check our bank account today?" He barely glanced up from the TV. "Nah, why?" I took a deep breath. "Because $20,000 is missing." That got his attention. He sat up straighter, but his expression, it wasn't shock or concern. It was something else, something I couldn't quite read. "What? That can't be right," he said, but his tone was all wrong. It was too casual, too unaffected. "I'm serious, Jason. I just checked at the ATM, $20,000 is gone." He shrugged, actually shrugged, as if we were talking about losing a few bucks in the couch cushions. "Must be a glitch or something," he muttered, already turning his attention back to the game. I stood there, mouth agape, unable to process his reaction. This was the man I married. This guy who couldn't be bothered to show even a hint of concern over our missing savings. As I watched him sit there, so nonchalant, so unbothered, something inside me snapped. The unease I'd felt last night, the strange behavior, the missing money, it all came crashing down on me at once. This wasn't just paranoia or a misunderstanding. Something was seriously wrong. But I knew I couldn't confront him outright, not without proof. If Jason was up to something, accusing him without evidence would only make him more careful. No, I needed to be smart about this. I needed to dig deeper, to find out exactly what was going on before I made my next move. As I headed to the bedroom to change out of my work clothes, my mind was already racing with possibilities. What had Jason done? Why did he need that money? And more importantly, how was I going to find out the truth? One thing was certain, I wasn't going to let this go. The woman who had woken up this morning, blissfully unaware of the deception around her, was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would test everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and myself. The game was on, and I was ready to play. The week that followed was like something out of a bad dream. You know those nightmares where you're trying to run but your legs won't move? That's how I felt, stuck, helpless, watching my life unravel around me. But I wasn't about to let Jason get away with whatever he was up to. No way. I started my investigation with that weird app on my phone. It bugged me, that tiny little icon sitting there innocently like it belonged. One night, after Jason had fallen asleep, or was pretending to, who knew anymore, I slipped out of bed and grabbed my laptop. I figured a quick Google search would tell me what I needed to know. Boy, was I in for a shock. It took me all of 5 minutes to discover the ugly truth. That innocent-looking app was actually spyware. Yeah, you heard that right. Spyware. The kind of thing you hear about in crime shows or tech horror stories. Not something you expect to find on your own phone, put there by your own husband. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type as I read through the description. This wasn't just some minor invasion of privacy. This app could track everything: my texts, my emails, my internet history. And worst of all, it could access my bank credentials. The pieces started falling into place, and let me tell you, the picture they formed was not pretty. Jason hadn't just violated my trust, he'd crossed a line I never thought he was capable of crossing. He'd stolen my money, $20,000 of my hard-earned savings, using information he'd gotten by spying on me. I felt sick to my stomach. How long had this been going on? How much did he know? And why? Why would he do this? We weren't struggling financially. We both had steady jobs, we paid our bills on time. There was no reason for him to resort to this. I must have sat there for hours, just staring at my laptop screen, trying to make sense of it all. By the time the sun started peeking through the curtains, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. But I also felt something else, a steely determination I didn't know I had in me. Over the next few days, I watched Jason like a hawk. Every laugh, every smile, every casual touch, they all seemed fake now, hollow. I started noticing little things I'd overlooked before. How he'd always insist on checking the mail first. How he'd get twitchy if I used his laptop. How he'd change the subject whenever I brought up our finances. It was like living with a stranger. A stranger wearing my husband's face. But I couldn't confront him, not yet. I needed more proof, and I needed to protect myself. So I played the role of the unsuspecting wife, all while plotting my next move. My first step was to secure what was left of my finances. I opened a new account at a different bank, one Jason didn't know about, and transferred what remained of my savings there. It wasn't much. That $20,000 had been a big chunk of what I'd put aside over the years, but it was something. Next, I started documenting everything. Every suspicious action, every unaccounted for expense, every lie, and there were plenty of those, now that I was paying attention. I wrote it all down in a notebook I kept hidden in my classroom at school. No way was I leaving that at home where Jason might find it. All the while, I kept asking myself, what was he planning? Was this just about the money? Or was there something bigger going on? I got my answer, or part of it, anyway, about a week after I'd discovered the spyware. I was grading papers in the living room when Jason came in, all smiles and excitement. "Hey, babe," he said, dropping a kiss on my cheek. "Guess what? The guys are planning a weekend getaway. You know, to blow off some steam, reconnect. What do you think?" I looked up at him, trying to keep my face neutral. "Oh, that sounds nice. When is it?" "This weekend, actually," he replied, not meeting my eyes. It was kind of last minute, but you know how it is. The stars aligned, everyone's schedules worked out. I nodded, my mind racing. This trip had never been mentioned before. And the timing, it was too convenient. "Sounds great," I said, forcing a smile. "Where are you guys going?" Jason shrugged, suddenly very interested in a loose thread on his shirt. "Oh, you know, just up to a cabin by the lake. Nothing fancy." "Right. Nothing fancy." I'd bet my last dollar that cabin by the lake was code for something a lot more extravagant. The next couple of days were a flurry of activity. Jason was in high spirits, whistling as he packed his bag, chatting about all the bonding he and his buddies were going to do. I played along, asking all the right questions, making all the right noises. But inside, I was seething. Friday evening rolled around, and Jason was ready to go. He gave me a quick hug, promised to call when he got there, yeah, right, and then he was gone. I watched his car disappear down our street, waiting until I couldn't see his taillights anymore before I sprang into action. Remember that spyware Jason had so thoughtfully installed on my phone? Well, two could play at that game. While he'd been busy packing, I'd done a little installing of my own on his phone. It hadn't been easy, but turns out when you're motivated by righteous anger and betrayal, you can learn to do all sorts of things. So there I was, sitting at our kitchen table with my laptop open, watching in real time as Jason's weekend unfolded. And let me tell you, it was not the low-key trip to a cabin he'd described. First stop. The airport. Yep, seems like the lake was actually in Miami. I watched as he checked into a 5-star hotel right on South Beach. Must be some cabin, huh? But that was just the beginning. Over the next 2 days, I got a front row seat to Jason's idea of blowing off steam. There were fancy restaurants where the appetizers probably cost more than I made in a day. Exclusive clubs with dress codes and cover charges that made my eyes water. A yacht tour around the bay, champagne included. And through it all, Jason was spending money like it was going out of style. My money. The $20,000 he'd stolen from me was funding this little adventure. I watched as photos started popping up on social media. Jason, grinning from ear to ear, cocktail in hand. Jason and his buddies, living it up at some rooftop bar. Jason on a yacht, the Miami skyline behind him. With each new image, each bank alert showing another extravagant charge, I felt something inside me harden. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about respect, about trust, about the vows we'd made to each other. Jason had taken all of that and thrown it away for what? A few days of playing big shot with his friends. As I sat there, watching my husband enjoy his ill-gotten gains, I made a decision. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug. This wasn't going to be fixed with an apology and a bunch of flowers. No, Jason was going to face consequences for what he'd done. I spent the rest of the weekend planning. I gathered evidence, screenshots of his location, records of his purchases, copies of those smug social media posts. I researched my legal options. And I started making calls, to my bank, to a lawyer, to a few of Jason's friends who I knew hadn't gone on this trip. By the time Sunday evening rolled around and I heard Jason's key in the lock, I was ready. The woman he'd left behind on Friday, the one he thought he could fool and take advantage of, she was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who wasn't about to let him get away with this betrayal. As I heard his footsteps coming up the hallway, I took a deep breath. The next few minutes were going to change everything. But I was ready. More than ready. It was time for Jason to learn that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. And I was going to enjoy every minute of making sure he understood just how badly he'd screwed up. Game on, Jason. Game on. You know that feeling when you're watching a storm roll in? The air gets heavy, the sky darkens, and you can feel the tension building. That's what it was like in our house after Jason got back from his little getaway. Every conversation felt loaded, every silence uncomfortable. We were like two boxers circling each other, waiting to see who'd throw the first punch. I'd love to say I confronted him right away, that I laid out all the evidence and watched him crumble. But the truth is, I chickened out. I told myself I was being smart, gathering more information. But deep down, I was scared. Scared of what would happen when everything came out in the open. Scared that maybe I didn't know Jason at all. So we danced around each other for days, playing at normal. He'd ask about my day, I'd inquire about work. We'd eat dinner together, watch TV, go to bed. All the while, I was watching him like a hawk, noting every phone call he took in private, every time he checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. It was about a week after he'd returned from Miami when things took another turn. I was in the kitchen, half-heartedly throwing together a salad for dinner, when Jason came bounding in. He was practically vibrating with energy, a far cry from the subdued act he'd been putting on lately. "Hey, babe," he said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "Got some news." I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Oh." He grinned, looking for all the world like an excited kid. "Yeah, the guys are planning another trip. A proper one this time, you know? We're thinking about heading up to Vermont for some hiking, maybe check out some of those craft breweries everyone's always talking about." I nearly cut my finger as the knife I was using to chop tomatoes slipped. Another trip? So soon after Miami? My mind was racing, trying to figure out his angle. "Vermont," I managed to say. "That sounds nice. When are you thinking of going?" Jason's smile faltered for just a second, so quick I almost missed it. "Well, that's the thing. It's kind of last minute. We're leaving tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night?" "Of course. Because why give your wife any notice when you're planning to disappear with her stolen money, right?" I forced a smile. "Wow, that is last minute. How long will you be gone?" "Just the weekend," he said, already turning away. back Sunday night. You don't mind, do you? I know it's short notice, but the guys really need this. Dave's going through some stuff with his wife, and Mark's stressed about work. He trailed off, looking at me with those puppy dog eyes that used to make my heart melt. Now they just made me want to throw something at him. No, it's fine, I said, waving a hand dismissively. You go have fun with the guys. I'm sure I can entertain myself for a weekend. Jason's relief was palpable. He gave me another quick kiss, muttered something about needing to pack, and disappeared upstairs. As soon as I heard our bedroom door close, I let out a long, shaky breath. My hands were trembling as I gripped the edge of the counter. This was it. This was my chance to really dig into what Jason had been up to. The next day was a blur of nervous energy. Jason was in high spirits, whistling as he packed, chatting about all the great outdoorsy stuff he and the guys were going to do. I played my part, asking all the right questions, making all the appropriate noises of interest. But inside, I was counting down the minutes until he was gone. Finally, Friday evening arrived. Jason lugged his duffel bag downstairs, gave me a goodbye hug that felt about as genuine as a $3 bill, and headed out. I watched from the window as his car disappeared down our street, my heart pounding so loud I was sure the neighbors could hear it. As soon as his taillights faded from view, I sprang into action. Remember that spyware I'd installed on his phone? Time to put it to good use. I fired up my laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as I logged into the tracking software. And there it was, a little blinking dot showing Jason's location. But instead of heading north towards Vermont, that dot was making its way to Logan International Airport. My suspicions confirmed, I dug deeper. A quick check of his email, yeah, I had access to that too, turnabout's fair play, right, showed a flight confirmation. Not to Vermont, but to Las Vegas. The so-called hiking trip was actually a weekend of gambling and God knows what else in Sin City. As I sat there, staring at the screen, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it. The final nail in the coffin of our marriage. Any lingering doubt I might have had about Jason's betrayal evaporated. But I wasn't about to sit at home and stew while he lived it up in Vegas. No, it was time to take action. First things first, I needed to protect what was left of my finances. I'd already moved most of my money to a new account, but I wanted to make sure Jason couldn't touch a cent more. A few phone calls to my bank, and I had them on high alert for any suspicious activity. Next, I started documenting everything. Every lie Jason had told about this trip, every dollar he was spending in Vegas, and boy, was he spending. I took screenshots, saved emails, recorded times and dates. If, no, when, this ended up in court, I wanted an airtight case. But I didn't stop there. Remember those friends of Jason's who hadn't gone on the Miami trip? I decided it was time to give them a call. It wasn't easy, picking up the phone and exposing Jason's lies to his friends. But I knew I needed allies, people who could corroborate my story. To my surprise, most of them were horrified when I told them what was going on. Turns out, Jason had been feeding them lies too. They thought he was going through a rough patch at work, that he needed to find himself. The only thing Jason was finding was the bottom of a bottle and the inside of a casino. As Friday night turned into Saturday morning, I found myself unable to sleep. I kept checking my laptop, watching as Jason's little dot moved from casino to casino, restaurant to bar. With each new charge that popped up on our credit card statement, I felt my resolve strengthen. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about justice. About making sure Jason understood the consequences of his actions. About standing up for myself in a way I never had before. I spent most of Saturday making plans. I spoke with a lawyer, laying out everything that had happened. I gathered all our financial records, documenting every unusual transaction over the past few months. I even reached out to a private investigator, just in case I needed more concrete evidence of Jason's activities. By the time Sunday rolled around, I was exhausted but determined. I watched on my laptop as Jason's dot made its way back to the airport, then onto a plane bound for Boston. In a few hours, he'd be walking through our front door, probably with some tall tale about Vermont and hiking and bromance. But I was ready for him. More than ready. As I heard his key in the lock, I took a deep breath. The woman Jason had married, the one who would have accepted his lies, who would have been too afraid to rock the boat, she was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who wasn't about to let him get away with this betrayal. I squared my shoulders, a small, determined smile playing on my lips. Jason thought he'd been so clever, so sneaky. He had no idea what was coming. Time to show him just how badly he'd underestimated me. You know that moment in movies when the hero is waiting for the villain to show up, and everything goes into slow motion? That's exactly how it felt when I heard Jason's key in the lock. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but at the same time, this weird calm had settled over me. This was it. No more hiding, no more pretending. It was time for the truth to come out. The door swung open, and there he was. Jason, my husband of 5 years, the man I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. He sauntered in, letting his duffel bag drop to the floor with a thud. His face was flushed, probably from the drinks he'd had on the plane. Yeah, I'd seen those charges too. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. It was like he was playing a part in some sitcom, the returning husband greeting his adoring wife. The thought made my stomach turn. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a salad I had no intention of eating. It gave me something to do with my hands, which were itching to either slap him or start throwing things. "Welcome back," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "How was Vermont?" Jason's eyes darted around the room, not quite meeting mine. "Oh, it was great. Really great. You know, lots of hiking, fresh air. The guys are already talking about making it an annual thing." I nodded, setting down the knife. "Sounds nice. Must have been quite the workout, all that hiking." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Yeah, I'm beat. Might need a vacation from my vacation, you know?" I hummed, leaning against the counter. "So, tell me about these hikes. Which trails did you guys take?" Jason's smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, you know, the usual ones. Can't remember the names right now. It's all a bit of a blur, to be honest. Dave knew a local guide who took us to some real hidden gems." I bet he did. I wondered how long he could keep this up, how many lies he could stack on top of each other before they all came tumbling down. "That's funny," I said, my voice dripping with fake sweetness, because I could have sworn I saw some pictures of you in Las Vegas on Instagram. "You know, at the Bellagio? Must have been my imagination, though. After all, you were in Vermont, right?" The color drained from Jason's face so fast I thought he might pass out. His mouth opened and closed a few times, like a fish out of water. What? No, I mean. I held up a hand, cutting off his stammering. "Save it, Jason. I know everything. The trip to Miami, this little jaunt to Vegas. Oh, and let's not forget the $20,000 you stole from our savings account." He stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. Then, something shifted in his expression. The shock gave way to something else, a kind of smug defiance that made my blood boil. "Well," he said, his voice taking on a new edge, "looks like the cat's out of the bag, huh? Yeah, I took the money. And you know what? I don't even feel bad about it. You're always so uptight about our finances, always saying we need to save, save, save. Well, guess what? Life's short. I wanted to have some fun for once." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man, this stranger wearing my husband's face, was actually trying to justify stealing from me. "Fun?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "You call betraying your wife and breaking the law fun?" Jason rolled his eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's not like we're hurting for money. And hey, at least I put it to good use. Those trips. Best time of my life." Something inside me snapped. All the anger, all the hurt I'd been holding back came rushing out. "Best time of your life?" I shouted. "While you were out there living it up, did you ever once think about me? About us? About the life we've built together?" He had the audacity to look annoyed. "Come on, it's not that big a deal. So I took a little money and had some fun. Sue me." I laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. Funny you should say that, Jason. Because that's exactly what I'm planning to do. That wiped the smug look off his face. What are you talking about? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I'm talking about divorce, Jason. I'm talking about taking you to court for every penny you stole from me, and then some. I'm talking about making sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are. He stared at me, his face a mix of shock and anger. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? I shot back. You seem to have forgotten who you're dealing with, Jason. I'm not some pushover you can manipulate and lie to. I'm your wife, or at least I was. And I've got enough evidence to bury you 10 times over. I watched as the reality of the situation slowly dawned on him. The bravado drained from his face, replaced by a look of panic. Evidence? What evidence? I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, just everything. Screenshots of your location during your little trips. Records of every penny you spent. Emails, text messages, social media posts. Oh, and let's not forget the testimony of your friends, the ones you lied to about where you were going. Jason's face went pale. You talked to the guys? Yep, I said, popping the pea. Turns out, they're not too happy about being used as cover for your little escapades. Funny how quickly people turn on you when they find out you've been lying to them, isn't it? He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. This can't be happening, he muttered. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered every lie, every betrayal, and my resolve hardened. Oh, it's happening all right, I said. And you know what the best part is? That $20,000 you stole? It's back in my account. Yeah, turns out banks take a pretty dim view of unauthorized transactions. Especially when they're presented with evidence of spyware on the account holder's phone. Jason's head snapped up. Spyware? What are you talking about? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, did I forget to mention that? Yeah, I found the little program you installed on my phone. You're not the only one who knows how to use technology, Jason. He slumped back in the chair, looking utterly defeated. So what now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I'd been building up to for days. Now, you're going to listen very carefully. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce first thing tomorrow morning. You're going to move out tonight. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. And if you even think about trying to access any of our shared accounts or assets, remember that I've got eyes on everything. One wrong move, and I'll have you in front of a judge so fast your head will spin. Jason nodded slowly, looking shell-shocked. And what about us? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Us? There is no us anymore, Jason. You killed that the moment you decided to betray me. The woman you married, the one who would have forgiven you, who would have tried to work things out. She's gone. You're dealing with me now. And I'm not nearly as forgiving. I watched as he struggled to process everything. Part of me, a very small part, felt a twinge of sympathy. But it was quickly overwhelmed by a sense of righteous anger and, surprisingly, relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I'll give you an hour to pack your things, I said, my voice steady. After that, I want you gone. We'll communicate through our lawyers from now on. As Jason stumbled to his feet and made his way upstairs, I let out a long, shaky breath. It was over. Well, this part anyway. I knew there was still a long road ahead, divorce proceedings, untangling our finances, rebuilding my life. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be a victim. And no matter what happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to be okay. More than okay. I was going to come out of this stronger than ever. As I heard Jason moving around upstairs, packing his things, I allowed myself a small, victorious smile. He had no idea what was coming. But he was about to find out just how badly he'd underestimated me. Game over, Jason. I win. You know that moment in chess when you realize you've got your opponent cornered? That's exactly how I felt as I watched Jason stumble around our bedroom, shoving clothes into a duffel bag. Every move he made, every panicked glance he threw my way, it all confirmed that my plan had worked perfectly. The trap was sprung, and Jason was well and truly caught. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching him with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This man, who I'd once loved more than anything in the world, now looked like a stranger to me. A pathetic, cornered stranger. "Don't forget your toiletries," I said, my voice cool and steady. "Wouldn't want you to have to come back for anything." Jason jumped at the sound of my voice, nearly dropping the handful of socks he was holding. Yeah, thanks," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. As he continued to pack, I decided it was time to lay out exactly what was going to happen next. No more games, no more lies. Just cold, hard facts. "So, here's how this is going to go," I began, my tone businesslike. "As I said, I've already spoken with a lawyer. Top divorce attorney in Boston, actually. She's drawing up the papers as we speak." Jason's hands stilled, his back to me. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his head drooped slightly. Good. Let him feel the weight of his actions. "The lawyer has advised me to document everything," I continued. "So that's exactly what I've done. I've got screenshots of your location during your little trips. Records of every penny you spent. Emails, text messages, social media posts, all neatly organized and ready to be presented in court if necessary." I paused, letting that sink in. Jason had turned to face me now, his face a mask of disbelief and growing fear. "But that's not all," I said, a small, grim smile playing on my lips. "Remember that spyware you so thoughtfully installed on my phone? Well, two can play at that game. I've got records of every call you made, every message you sent, every website you visited while you were away." Jason's face drained of color. You can't do that," he sputtered. "That's invasion of privacy." I couldn't help but laugh. "Invasion of privacy? That's rich coming from you, Jason. But don't worry, I'm sure the judge will be very interested in hearing about how you came to be an expert on digital privacy laws." He sank down onto the bed, head in his hands. "This can't be happening," he muttered. "Oh, but it is," I replied, my voice hard. "And we're just getting started. You see, while you were off living it up in Vegas, I was busy. Very busy." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through a list I'd prepared. "Let's see. I've frozen all our joint accounts. Cancelled our shared credit cards. Changed the passwords on our home security system, our Netflix account, even our Amazon Prime. Oh, and I've already informed our families and close friends about what's going on." Jason's head snapped up at that last part. "You told our families?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, feeling a twinge of satisfaction at the look of horror on his face. "Yep. Your parents, my parents, our siblings. Even called up a few of our closest friends. You know, the ones you lied to about your whereabouts." He groaned, flopping back onto the bed. "Why would you do that?" "Because you left me no choice, Jason," I snapped, my calm facade cracking for a moment. "You lied, you stole, you betrayed every ounce of trust one had in you. Did you really think I was just going to sit back and let you get away with it?" He sat up, a desperate look in his eyes. "Come on, it wasn't that bad. I made a mistake, okay? We can work this out. We don't need lawyers and courts and all that mess. Just give me another chance." I stared at him, hardly believing what I was hearing. After everything he'd done, he still thought he could talk his way out of this. "Another chance?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "You want me to give you another chance? After you stole $20,000 from me? After you lied to my face, over and over again? After you made me feel like I was going crazy for suspecting something was wrong?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger that was threatening to boil over. "No, Jason. There are no more chances. Not for you. Not after this." He must have seen something in my eyes, some final confirmation that this was really happening, because his whole demeanor changed. The desperation gave way to anger, his face contorting into an ugly sneer. "Fine," he spat. "You want to play it this way? Go ahead. But don't think for a second that I'm going down without a fight. I've got dirt on you too, You know, I'll make sure everyone knows what a cold, calculating witch you really are. I couldn't help but smile at that. Oh, Jason. You really don't get it, do you? I'm not the one who stole money. I'm not the one who lied and cheated. Everything I've done has been in response to your actions. But by all means, go ahead and try to smear my name. I'm sure the judge will be very interested in hearing about how the victim of your financial fraud is the real bad guy here. His face fell as the reality of his situation sank in. He had no leverage, no way out. He was well and truly trapped. Now, I said, glancing at my watch, your hour is almost up. I suggest you finish packing and get out of my house. Jason nodded numbly, turning back to his half-packed bag. As he zipped it up and headed for the door, he paused, looking back at me with a mixture of regret and resentment. I really did love you, you know, he said softly. For a moment, I felt a pang in my chest. A ghost of the love we once shared, the dreams we had built together. But then I remembered every lie, every betrayal, and my resolve hardened once more. No, Jason, I replied, my voice steady. You loved yourself. You loved the idea of me, the version of me that would let you do whatever you wanted without consequences. But that person doesn't exist anymore. She's gone, and you have no one to blame but yourself. With that, I turned and walked away, heading downstairs to wait for him to leave. I heard him shuffling down the stairs a few minutes later, his footsteps heavy with defeat. As the front door closed behind him, I let out a long, shaky breath. It was done. The trap had been sprung, the confrontation had played out, and now I was alone. For a moment, the silence of the house felt oppressive. The weight of everything that had happened, everything that was still to come, threatened to overwhelm me. But then I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and allowed myself a small, victorious smile. I had done it. I had stood up for myself, had refused to be a victim. Yes, the road ahead would be tough. There would be legal battles, emotional turmoil, and the challenge of rebuilding my life. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of hope. As I walked into the kitchen to make myself a much-needed cup of tea, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who had discovered Jason's betrayal all those weeks ago. This woman was stronger, more determined. She had faced her worst fears and come out on top. And as I settled in with my tea, ready to start planning the next phase of my life, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was more than ready to face them. Jason had underestimated me, had thought he could play me for a fool. But in the end, I was the one who had outsmarted him. The game was over, and I had won. Now it was time to start a new chapter, on my own terms. And you know what? I couldn't wait to see what came next. They say the silence after a storm is deafening. Let me tell you, it's nothing compared to the silence in a house after you've kicked out your lying, cheating husband. As I stood there in my living room, watching the shadows lengthen as the sun set, the quiet was so thick I could almost touch it. For a moment, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. What had I done? Had I really just blown up my entire life? But then I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and reminded myself of everything Jason had put me through. This wasn't my fault. I wasn't the one who had destroyed our marriage. I was just the one brave enough to end it. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and more paperwork than I'd ever seen in my life. My lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Sarah, was worth every penny. She walked me through the divorce proceedings step by step, her calm confidence a balm to my frayed nerves. "You've done everything right," she assured me during one of our meetings. "The documentation you've gathered is impeccable. Jason doesn't have a leg to stand on." I nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and exhaustion. "What's our next move?" Sarah leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing on her lips. "Now, we wait for Jason's response to the divorce petition. But don't worry, I've got a few tricks up my sleeve if he tries to play hardball." As we wrapped up the meeting, Sarah paused, her expression softening slightly. "You know, in my line of work, I see a lot of people at their worst. But you're handling this with more grace and strength than most. You should be proud of yourself." Her words stayed with me as I drove home, a warm glow of satisfaction settling in my chest. I was proud of myself. I had faced my worst nightmare and come out swinging. But I knew the fight was far from over. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. Some days, I felt invincible, ready to take on the world. Others, I could barely drag myself out of bed, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me like a physical force. It was during one of those low moments that I got the call. Jason's name flashed on my phone screen, and for a split second, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I answered, my voice cautious. "Hey," Jason's voice came through, sounding small and defeated. I just wanted to talk. Can we meet somewhere?" I felt my heart rate spike. "I don't think that's a good idea, Jason. Our lawyers can handle any communication we need to have." He sighed heavily. "Please. I need to explain. To apologize. You deserve that much, at least." Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. As I got ready, I gave myself a stern talking to in the mirror. "You're not falling for his tricks again," I told my reflection firmly. "You're just giving him a chance to clear the air. That's all." The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, the buzz of conversation and the rich aroma of coffee filling the air. I spotted Jason at a table in the corner, hunched over a steaming mug. He looked different. Smaller somehow, like all the bravado had been drained out of him. As I slid into the seat across from him, he looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. "Thanks for coming," he said softly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. A waitress came over, and I ordered a latte, more for something to do with my hands than because I actually wanted it. Once she left, Jason took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," he blurted out. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that. I screwed up. Badly. And I'm so sorry." I studied him for a moment, trying to reconcile this contrite version of Jason with the man who had stolen from me, lied to me, betrayed me in every way possible. "Why?" I asked finally. "Why did you do it?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking lost. "I don't know. I felt stuck, I guess. Like life was passing me by. And then when I took that money, when I went on those trips, I felt alive for the first time in years. But it was all a lie. I see that now." I felt a twinge of sympathy, quickly squashed by the memory of everything he'd put me through. "That doesn't excuse what you did, Jason. You could have talked to me. We could have worked through it together. Instead, you chose to lie and steal." He nodded miserably. I know, and I hate myself for it. I've lost everything, my wife, my home, my friends. Even my parents can barely look at me." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Is there any chance at all that we could try to work things out?" For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Going back to our life together, trying to rebuild what we had. But then I thought about all the nights I'd spent awake, sick with worry and doubt. All the times he'd looked me in the eye and lied. All the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. "No, Jason," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "There's no going back. What you did, it changed everything. I can't be with someone I can't trust. And I don't trust you. I don't think I ever will again." He slumped in his seat, nodding slowly. "I understand. I don't blame you. I hope someday you can forgive me." As I left the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Seeing Jason like that, hearing his apology, it didn't erase what he'd done, but it gave me a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and long talks with friends and family. The divorce was finalized faster than I expected, thanks in large part to the mountain of evidence I'd gathered. Jason didn't put up much of a fight in the end. I think he knew he didn't have a leg to stand on. As for me, well, I won't lie and say it was easy. There were plenty of nights when I cried myself to sleep, mourning the life I thought I'd have. But there were also moments of unexpected joy and discovery. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into new hobbies, even started training for a marathon. Turns out, running is a great way to work through your feelings. 1 year to the day after I confronted Jason, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, getting ready for a night out with friends. As I applied my lipstick, I caught my own eye in the reflection and paused. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who had discovered her husband's betrayal all those months ago. This woman was stronger, wiser, more confident. She had faced her worst fears and come out the other side. As I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, I felt a surge of excitement for what the future might hold. Sure, my life hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. But maybe, just maybe, it had turned out better. Because here's the thing about consequences, they're not just about punishment. They're about growth, about learning, about becoming the person you're meant to be. Jason's actions had consequences, yes. But so did mine. And the woman I'd become as a result. Well, she was someone I was proud to be. So here's to new beginnings, to second chances, the ones we give ourselves, and to the beautiful, unpredictable journey of life. I don't know what's coming next, but I do know one thing, I'm ready for it. Bring it on, world. I've got this.